All right, welcome everyone. We are here in the beautiful cook shop kitchen again this year for Fixin Fair, and we're super excited to make just a wholesome and hearty, just like a classic minestrone soup. So the first step actually happened last night. I soaked the beans that I'm going to use because there aren't a lot of rules with minestrone soup, but I would say you want the goodness of beans to be in there. It's otherwise very much meant to be a soup that helps you like clean out the refrigerator and use whatever you've got on hand and change it with the seasons. But my beans soaked overnight, and so I've got those set aside. And then today, what I want to do to take the first step is to saute my onion, carrot, and celery, just really nice and low and slow. I'm going to turn on my burner to a low heat. We've got our induction burner, so I'm going to get the olive oil right in the pan. Maybe like 2 tablespoons of olive oil. If you're following along on the recipe, or you want to pop over to cook first, under our seasonal recipes, you can find this whole recipe written down. But I've got my oil in the pan, and I'll let that heat up for just a moment, and get my chopped onion and chopped celery I already had ready to go. Oh, and I've got one more carrot to chop, because I want to show you. I'm going to throw in my chopped carrot, but with this last one, what I do is I like to cut my carrots just in what's called an oblique slice. I'm kind of rotating the knife and rotating the carrot, and I'm getting just like inconsistent, kind of chunky and smaller and triangular shapes. That's just how I like my carrots to be in my soup. So that's a style that I've often started cutting them in. And it just gives you some like irregular shapes here, some smaller, some bigger. So they'll cook a little bit differently, but they'll all get done in the end. So I've got those 3 ingredients in my pan, just for a nice long saute. All right, so we have got a classic start to our soup going. Just onions, celery, and carrots sauteed low and slow. They've spent about 10 minutes in here. You could continue to go a lot longer. The onions are starting to get translucent and a little bit browned, but that will work to be ready for our next step, which is getting the other aromatics into our soup. So I've got 2 bay leaves. I think an important part of my cooking is knowing what herbs are around my neighborhood. So I know where to find fresh bay leaves. I know where a bay tree is. And I do something a little bit particular. I accordion fold my bay leaf, and that's just kind of cracking it open and starting to get the oils in the leaf out. And I'm gonna make an open spot in my pot, throw those bay leaves in the bottom. I also know that my neighbor has got a beautiful thyme plant. So I've got 4 sprigs of thyme. Right here is what I'm using today. Throwing those in the middle, and I'm folding the hot vegetables on top of them. So they've got their little blanket of onion, celery, and carrot. And they're starting to release their oils. In about a minute or 2 at most, I'll be able to smell the bay leaf. The bay leaf first, because it went in there. And now I can smell the thyme. And then I'm going to throw the garlic in. This is another quick add to our saute. Stir it in with the hot vegetables. And again, in about a minute, maybe less than a minute with the garlic, when I can smell the garlic, it's time to throw this saute in the crock pot with the rest of my ingredients. We're doing a simple crock pot recipe today. It's something you could convert to stovetop. But the first addition to the bottom of my crock pot are my veggies and my herbs, sauteed in olive oil, are going in the bottom of the crock. All right, and then through the magic of television, my crock pot is now ready and centered. I've added my saute, and now it's truly most of the other ingredients are going in. So I've got my soaked beans, which are a wonderful winter find at the farmer's market.
What variety of bean is that?
This is an orca bean. I've also made this recipe with Jacob's cattle bean or Rockwell are pretty common in the Pacific Northwest. That's one that our farmers are growing. Any white bean will do. I haven't made this soup with a chickpea, but I think that that would be really wonderful, mostly because I love chickpeas. But a slow cooker bean just becomes really beautiful and creamy and delicious. And it, when some of the beans fall apart, it adds to the flavor and the texture of the broth. So like I said, not a whole lot of rules. On the recipe, you can see some suggestions for how to make this super seasonal. It's winter right now, so I've got a can of diced tomatoes that I'm gonna add, but in the peak of summertime, you definitely want to use 4 or 5 beautiful, ripe, fresh tomatoes diced up. I had some broccoli left over in the refrigerator, and this is just the broccoli stem. I peeled it and chopped it into little chunks about the same size as my carrot. Remember, I'm using up what I've got in the refrigerator, so broccoli stems are going in there. I'm gonna do some salt and pepper because I did not add that. You know what, I'm gonna hold off on the salt because what I'm using today for my broth is actually a bouillon, and you could use a vegetable broth or a chicken broth, or I like to do a beef bouillon broth with minestrone. So I'm gonna hold off on the salt because the bouillon has got salt in it. But I'm gonna do 6 cups of water. Try to get the bouillon that's stuck to my spoon off of my spoon and into the pot. I'm definitely gonna give it a little stir to break up that bouillon. I love fresh ground black pepper, so I am gonna put pepper in at this time. So it's a part of the long, slow cooker cook. And then this is going to, all of those ingredients are now in the crock. This is gonna go for about 5.5 hours on high in a slow cooker. We're gonna let all of these delicious ingredients mingle. We're gonna let those beans get cooked and plump, and then we'll come back for the final step. The last half hour, we'll add chopped kale, and then at the very end, I've already pre-cooked my pasta. I'll throw in some cooked pasta and talk about what else you might like to include in your minestrone, but we've got those ingredients in the crock for about 5.5 hours until the beans get tender. All right, it has been 5.5 hours on high that my slow cooker has been cooking. I tested a bean. It's got a nice cooked to doneness to it. It's not totally falling apart. Some of the beans are still intact. So I'm gonna go ahead and just like really quickly rough chop the kale that I have. And that's gonna go in the soup just long enough to get wilted. Nice and steamy soup. Fold in the kale. And what we're doing is we're just gonna get that kale nice and mixed in there, just so it wilts, and we'll let the whole crock cook for like 20 more minutes till we add our final ingredients. All right, the very last thing, once we've let that kale get nice and wilted, is I have pre-cooked my pasta. I haven't had good luck with like the right timing for throwing it in the soup. I'm sure recipes are out there, but I prefer to just pre-cook it to al dente because it will be sitting in the hot soup. And I make big batches, so there are leftovers, and each time I'm heating it to serve a meal, it's gonna cook the pasta a little bit more. The pasta will continue to expand. So I cooked this pasta according to the ingredients al dente, and I like, for my minestrone or for soups in general, I like a shell-shaped pasta, something that's got a little scoop to it, because the small cut vegetables are gonna end up like inside of the pasta, and I love those bites of the pasta that's got like the carrot and the celery, maybe even a bean has tucked in. So the last thing I'm gonna do is add my cooked pasta and give it a really nice, good stir. All right, so here it is, my finished minestrone soup. Don't want to spill any broth. Showing it to you. But I do want to talk about, I made some notes on the recipe that you can find at cookfirst.org under the seasonal recipes page. For fall and winter, you could absolutely include a butternut squash or celery root, or even turnips or parsnips at the same time that the rest of the vegetables go into the slow cooker for that first 5.5 hours. In the summertime, I mentioned using fresh tomatoes. You can also use chopped green beans when the veggies go in the slow cooker, and even try adding some chopped zucchini. That's something we tend to have an abundance of, right, in the summertime. Add some chopped zucchini at the end when you add your greens. So we're lucky to live in a place where year-round you'll get the kales and the hardy greens, but during summertime you can also add summer squash, zucchini into the mix. And then for a meat option, I used beef broth in my soup today, but you could omit that, of course, and make this vegetarian and vegan. Or you could include, I've made small meatballs that I pre-cook in the oven and I add to the soup at the end. Or you could slice up some sausage. I'd probably do that same like oblique cut where I'm kind of rotating my knife, so there's some bigger and smaller chunks of a cooked sausage, and add that at the end. That'll add a lot of flavor if you want to add meat to this dish. But this is a wonderful hearty soup. Make sure you try beans at the farmer's market. I feel like that's one of those undervalued winter seasonal finds that you want to try from your farmers. You can use your double up food bucks to purchase those, which is nice. And I'm hungry, so I'm gonna have a little bite of my soup. It's perfect.